Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Ambassadorial Wing and another installment of Afternoons with the Ambassador. And to all of you that are out there in YouTube land or Facebook or Twitch or wherever you're watching this on social media, welcome and thank you for being here. And today, got something a little bit different for you all. Got a first-time guest. Been talking with him back and forth on Twitter and everything, and we got this set up for today, and I want to introduce Luke from AnyWorldButOurs. Luke, it is a pleasure, and thank you for joining me this afternoon. Welcome to the Ambassadorial Wing. So,
no worries. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Yeah, and we've been talking about this for a few weeks now, and we finally got everything situated and lined up, and here you are. So,
here we are.
Anyway, and real quick to the chat. Superior Hero Reviews, my good friend Cody. Good to see you, bud. Hope you're feeling well, and always a pleasure to have you in the chat. So, we've been working on this for a little bit, and today we're just going to have a nice little chat, talk about just about anything pop culture related, and some of the things we love, what our favorite things are, and so on, and just what it is about this thing about YouTube and pop culture that we love so much. So, that Luke being said, I'll kind of open up the floor, and I'm your host. You are my guest. Where would you like to start?
I guess what brought us to YouTube, I guess, is the kind of that's why we're here essentially, isn't it? So, what brought you to YouTube first? What made you want to be a creator, sort of thing? So,
yeah. Totally. Well, for me, I have been a geek all my life.
Yeah.
My parents were geeks. My grandparents were, in a manner of speaking, geeks. I am just the next generation of my family of geeks. And I grew up watching a lot of the great TV shows and movies of the 80s and 90s, even well before that. And it was kind of a foregone conclusion. I was going to be a geek. And for about a year and a half, the missus, I refer to her as Mad Messenger, she's like, honey, I love you and I love talking about this stuff, but maybe you should go start a YouTube channel and talk with other people about it. And I was like, okay. And she was like, for a year and a half, she was telling me, honey, go start a YouTube channel. Honey, go start a YouTube channel. I'm like, all right, fine. I'll go start a YouTube channel. And I've been doing this for a little over a year now, and it has been, by and large, a blast. I've met a lot of great people from just about everywhere, and I've had the opportunity to bring my love and my passion and my perspective on this thing called pop culture, and particularly I think two of the greatest decades for it, and that is of course the decades I grew up as a kid, the 80s and the 90s. And I've spent the last year just bursting at the seams talking about this stuff, both the old and the new, in terms of pop culture, and it's been an incredible journey, and I've just been really, really blessed. And it's like I say, it's given me the opportunity to meet people like yourself and have the opportunity to talk about the things we love.
Exactly that. That makes perfect sense. It's the same reason I took it up, really, as well, because I guess especially now in this time where we're not allowed to, or we're not supposed to speak to people outdoors, you can't, there's nowhere to speak about these sort of things. So the next choice was to create something like a YouTube channel. I had a social media profile anyway for this, and I just thought, what am I waiting for? Just go with it. And like you say, you meet all these other people with the same interests, similar interests to yourself, and there you go. You're meeting all these people that have the same stuff. You're talking about the things you love with people that have an understanding for it, as opposed to, like you said, with your missus. They're the same situation with me. When I try and bring it up with my girlfriend, she's just like, not that she's not interested, because she likes what I like, but it's not her passion. Whereas it's our passion. We talk with people that it's their passions as well, so we all have the same love for it. Whereas it's great to share that love with other people that don't know it or haven't experienced it before. But when you get into particulars with people that know what they're talking about, that's where it gets more fun, I guess.
Yeah. Well, growing up as a kid, I've had friends in, school and in my neighborhood, and we'd get together and we'd play with our toys. We'd trade comic books. We'd trade different types of gaming cards. We'd play all sorts of card games or board games or whatever. And this is just honestly kind of a evolution of that whole thing in a lot of ways. And, as I mentioned, the missus herself is a geek. And at some points, our fandoms, our geekdoms do mesh, but at some points, they miss. And, that's a great thing. I mean, okay, for example, the missus is very much what they call a twihard. She loves Twilight. She loves the whole series. She loves the books. She loves the movies. And I myself, I know I'm going to catch some flack for this, and I do not care. I went to see the Twilight movies, except for the last one, the part 2 of the last one in theaters. But, it was something that I very much enjoyed. And when I met her, when we started dating, I was like, hey, you know what? I like this too. And she looked at me and she's like, but you're a guy.
I enjoyed it too.
Guys don't like Twilight. I'm like, actually, there are quite a few guys. There are quite a few guys who like Twilight. Well, and the other thing was, I've kind of mentioned this before, and I know this is going to might be a little bit of a touchy subject. I know Buffy the Vampire Slayer had just ended, and I was still in that headspace where I liked stuff about vampires and werewolves and all that sort of thing. So when Twilight came along, I was like, ooh, I get to spend a little more time in this thing that I enjoy.
Yes.
So, and, the thing is, you cannot just pigeonhole a person when they're a geek, because there may be one particular franchise or a fandom that they are a part of. But when you're a geek, if something resonates with you, it's going to resonate with you, regardless of your background or your gender. So,
yeah,
and like you said, you like Twilight too. So, hey, Twilight
was great.
United.
It was great, and the soundtrack as well was awesome too. So, I loved that.
Yes,
it's still now Carter Butwell stuff. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the thing for me is, I don't know how this is with you. Music has always been a passion of mine. I will say this: if music doesn't reach you, then you're somewhat dead inside, because music is one of those universal things that resonates with everybody.
Yeah, on some level it has.
And with a lot of the franchises that we all enjoy, music is the lifeblood of it. I mean, if you look at, say, well, as you mentioned with Twilight, the music that was used, it was a lot of grunge and very alternative rock bands and so on that did the soundtrack. I will tell you, Super Mega Black Hole by Muse from the first Twilight movie. I love that song. I watched the music video, the official music video.
Supermassive black hole.
I just got owned by the missus. Supermassive black hole. Thank you, dear. I love that. I love that. I love that song. The official video for it is a little odd, but I do like the fan edits where they do the footage from the baseball game in the first Twilight, and they have the music. And I love there's a rhythm and there's a heaviness and everything to that song, and I really, really dig it. So,
yeah. It's a great movie, or a great series. Like you say, you can't define people with whether they like Star Wars, whether it be Twilight, whether it be Marvel, whether it be anything. They cross over in some ways as well. So,
yeah. Well, let me ask you, in terms of and there may not be a definitive answer for this. Which do you like more? Are you a Marvel guy? Or are you a DC guy? Or are you a little bit of both?
A little bit of both, I think. So when I was a kid, Batman was always my favorite when I was growing up. I'd never, I don't remember being a massive Spider-Man fan up until maybe when I was older, maybe like 10, 11, where I was watching, the old cartoons on Nickelodeon and stuff. Not Nickelodeon, Fox. But when I was young, so maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it was Batman outfits. It was, the costumes you could buy. It was them. It was the Batman toys and stuff like that. But now, as I've grown up older and the content we're getting now, I'd probably lean more towards Marvel just because of the depth that they've kind of gone into. I can't really say that in terms of DC, I haven't managed to see the Snyder Cut or anything like that, as we've just mentioned backstage. But up until I watched that, I think the issue. It's not really an issue, but the thing that stands out between Marvel and DC, they both have so much potential, but Marvel have kind of grasped that potential more, whereas DC kind of they have that potential, they know they've got it, but they're not really doing much with it. In terms of when you compare the two, the movie timelines and stuff like that, there's so much they can do, and they I don't know whether they're ignoring it or they're scared to go up against. Not go up against, because they are already up against Marvel, but trying to incorporate so many different elements like Marvel have, maybe it's not something they're considering, or I don't know.
Yeah, I was kind of the same way. I mean, I grew up reading Marvel comics. I did read DC a little bit, but Marvel had so many of the titles that I really enjoyed, and not in particular just superheroes. But also, they had the license for G.I. Joe and for Transformers, and I collected those comics as a kid. And I think particularly in the 80s and into the 90s, I collected those comics. I read those comics. I devoured them. But there were some Marvel superheroes I really liked. One of my favorites is the Fantastic Four, and I'm really hoping that somewhere down the road we do get a decent, serious take. Not like super heavy or super serious, but a better take on the Fantastic Four. But I read Fantastic Four. I read Iron Man, and finally seeing the MCU pop off the way it has back in 2008 with the first Iron Man, and then culminating with the first Avengers movie, and just going through the entire, what they call now, the Infinity Saga. Now, I will be fair and I will be candid. There were some weak entries, and there were some moments in some of the movies that were a little not as good as they could have been. But the thing about film and about just about any art, because I consider films, I consider comics all a form of art. All art is subjective, and everybody's going to have an opinion about it. So you're not going to reach everyone.
No,
but if you consider what Marvel has done, particularly with the MCU, and now with WandaVision, and we can talk about that a little bit if you want to, if you're able to watch WandaVision.
Yeah.
They really have latched onto something. I know people say that the MCU movies to some degree are formulaic. I would say that's about a 50-50 perspective, honestly. There is some formula to it, but at the same time, within that formula, there is the opportunity for there to be originality, for there to be moments that you don't see coming.
Yeah.
And I will say, for me, one of my all-time favorites, and this is something that me and the missus we went to see in theaters, was Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. And what they really struck on in that movie was the whole concept of what is family, who is family, what you call your family. And I love that dynamic in that. So,
oh, you're back. It just broke up slightly.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Yeah, So, anything along those lines that you want to touch upon, Luke?
No, like I completely agree. Like you say, they went into it a lot more, and like you say, when they're bringing out these new, or they've started to bring out this, I guess, the next phase, if you want to call it. We've had the Infinity Saga, now we've got this next phase coming up with WandaVision, Falcon and Winter Soldier, which is coming out tomorrow. You know, we're getting a new, I don't want to say a new age, but this next phase. A lot of people I've speak to, kind of in my friendship group and stuff like that, they were kind of not worried, but, you know, like the thought process was, how are they going to top that? You know, in terms of the Infinity Saga, like they did a lot with what they did. You know what I mean? Like some characters have gone, some will come back, some won't, and so on and so forth. But how do you create an event or a storyline? Because when you put it as a collective, it had a start, it had an end, everything was all tied up kind of in a way, you know. But it was amazing in terms of a whole journey. And how are they going to now top that in terms of phase 4? And with the start of WandaVision, I think they've shown that they still have a lot of running room, or they know what they're doing. They have a plan. I think that's the right thing to say. They've got a plan and they know where they're going with it, which is obviously good, because maybe that's the difference between Marvel and DC. Touching back on that, they have a plan on where they see a particular direction and where they want to take it, where they want to take certain storylines, certain superheroes, how they want them to cross over. Whereas my kind of opinion on the DC, they're trying to bring it together, but without any clear, like, direct plan or direction of where an end result would be, if that makes sense. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, actually, I do wholeheartedly agree with you. The thing is, and I don't want to get into the whole thing about the whole studio system and what have you, and corporations being involved in being in charge of all these franchises and so on. But the thing I will say in terms of the MCU and Marvel going forward, and DC with the DCU or the Snyderverse or whatever form that takes,
the
MCU had a person in charge of the vision going forward. That was Kevin Feige, and Feige has been able to craft this overarching storyline throughout all those movies and everything else that's been done, and now going into WandaVision and Falcon and Winter Soldier. Feige had a vision, he had a plan, he knew he knew where he was going. Not to mention, here's the other thing. If you look at the backlog of Marvel Comics for just the superheroes, if you look at the backlog for characters like Iron Man, the Avengers, and their various iterations, because there have been numerous iterations of the Avengers team. It hasn't just been one team the whole time. You look at the back catalog for characters like Thor and Fantastic Four and X-Men and all the different titles that are underneath the X-Men umbrella. It is massive.
Vast.
Absolutely massive. So they have a vast resource to pull from and craft these stories and take these characters in different directions. Now, the thing I will say about WandaVision, and I've done several streams discussing it and everything, I very much enjoyed the whole slow burn concept of WandaVision. I liked the story, took its time to build. Excuse me. And I did enjoy the finale. Did I have a few issues with the finale? Yeah, I did. I had a few, but by and large, it didn't ruin my experience. And I think the thing that DC is lacking is someone who has a vision going forward. They're trying to do it by committee. And I think in this particular instance, you need someone that knows DC very, very well, knows the lore, knows the framework, knows the characters, and knows how to build a universe out of it.
Yeah.
Now the question is, who in the world do you get to do something like that? And I'll let you go in just a minute, Luke. I just want to send a quick shout out to a couple people. Keely Chow. Keely, good to see you. And I'll bring up Irrefutable Comrades comment here. Are you guys excited for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge? Honestly, Irrefutable Comrade, I have not heard a whole lot about that, to be honest with you, so I can't really give an opinion on it. So, okay. Anyway, in terms of the whole thing with DC, they really need someone that can come in, not clean house, but organize the house and say, okay, this is the direction we're going forward in. That is the big thing right now. Now, whether that is a person like Kevin Feige who knows DC, knows all the ins and outs, and knows the universe, I think that right there needs to be their first big thing going forward. Not to mention, if they decide to go forward with the Snyderverse and branch off from it, okay, cool, then do that. Or if you're going to have the Snyderverse and you're going to have the DCEU as two separate entities, okay, cool, then do that. But you need to give the public a sense of what direction you're going in. So, Luke, go ahead.
Yeah, I completely agree. They need, for example, like you've likened Kevin Feige or Feige. I can't pronounce his name properly. Sorry.
It's okay.
But they need. Some people, for example, probably don't agree with the direction he's taken Marvel. Where, for example, whereas if someone was in that position for DC, some people probably don't like the direction he'll take it, whoever that person might be. But there needs to be someone to set that direction, like you've just said, whether it be a Snyderverse and a DCEU. Up until there's a point where there's a definitive answer or a definitive difference between the two, or a direction. So DC to say we're doing this and that, or we're just doing this. There's no path. There's no one kind of knows what's happening. Everyone's kind of guessing, like, who's Batman? Which Superman are we getting? Which storyline are we getting? Is it all tied into Justice League? Is it not? Like, Marvel, we're guessing, but we're guessing for the right reasons because we want to know kind of what's next in terms of the storyline. The issue with DC, well, my issue is we're asking the questions, but it's kind of the wrong questions. We're like, what's happening in terms of what movie we're getting, not the storyline. We don't know which direction the movies are going to even take. Whereas with Marvel, the questions we're asking are, who's going to come into this one or who's going to come into that one, because there's that pathway. The theory, we're theorizing a lot more, I feel like I'm theorizing a lot more with Marvel due to the content we've had, because we can see, we have an idea of where it could go. So whereas with the DC, it's kind of, we don't know where it, like you've just said, whether they're going to do a DCEU, whether they're going to go with the Snyderverse, whether they're going to do both. Up until there's some clarification, we're kind of, it's just speculation maybe at this point. There's no real definitive answer in terms of which way they could go. I know they've got films coming out like Robert Pattinson's Batman and stuff, but there's no where's that going to fit, and then is it going to fit in? That's the issue, I think.
Well, and the thing for me is, if they wanted to even set up a whole separate line and call it the Elseworlds stories, where you have movies, say like Joker with Joaquin Phoenix, and you have the Matt Reeves as Batman, and so on, and you have those as, say, the Elseworlds series of movies or whatever, I think people would latch onto that, because there are a lot of people who love the Elseworlds type of stories. Because if you, Luke, I don't know how many of the DC AU movies that you've seen, but honestly, right there, that is a very good formula for how you can do Elseworld stories that people can gravitate to, and they can get a good flavor of these different iterations and these different heroes from different perspectives and so on. One of my favorites I saw just like a few months ago was the Flashpoint Paradox, which it's like an hour and a half long, and it really encapsulates the whole Flashpoint Paradox storyline from the comics. But it does it in a way that it does tie in to the other DCAU movies, the DC animated universe films that they've put out in the last several years, because they did one called Justice League War that culminated with Justice League Dark Apocalypse War, and it was almost like it was during the whole New 52 time frame when they were doing that whole series of comics and everything, and they did a series of movies that were framed within that particular timeline, and then they ended it essentially with a bit of the end of Flashpoint, the Flashpoint movie. Mm-hmm. So, have you had the opportunity to see any of those animated films?
So, in terms of the DC animated, the last thing I remember watching was years ago. It was the old Justice League cartoon, you know, where again I think it was on Toonami or Cartoon Network. This is going back years now, but those were the kind of the last things I watched. Okay. And then they had Batman Forever and not Forever. It was the Black Batman. That one, I think so, where he had the red.
Batman Beyond. The one set in the future.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
So those are kind of the last animated versions I've watched. And then in terms of films, it was in terms of the kind of DC, I don't even know if it would fit into if it is even part of DC, but the Dark Knight trilogy. Them, and then I watched Batman vs Superman and stuff like that. But I've not watched the Justice League because of, I guess, so many people really didn't like it. I guess I'm not sure. But so I was like, and I had obviously heard rumors about this Snyder Cut and stuff like that because it's been in the background for quite a while now. So I was just like, maybe I'll just wait for that because that's the vision that it's supposed to be, I guess. But yes. Maybe I'll probably watch both over this next week or so. Now we can kind of get access to both and then do a comparison. You know, which there's two clear directions. You know, we've just said there's no real direction that they're choosing. Once this new cut has been out, they have kind of two source materials, like from the same characters, the same film, the same narrative, the same storyline, but one will have a particular feel and one will have a different one, and they have essentially two. Research pools or something. I'm not sure how you define it, but
that's perfect.
Way to take it, you know, because will have had a particular reaction from one, and they'll have a particular reaction from another, and it'll give them essentially, okay, we can see which one was better received. We can maybe work with that, but maybe that was the plan all along, so they can kind of see which way to take it. I don't know, but you know, up until now, like I say, I haven't watched the Justice League. The last things I watched Suicide Squad, but that was a while when it first came out and stuff like that. So, like we've mentioned, they've got so much they can do, but up until they have that clear direction or clear plan, it's just I don't know how I would describe it. They're just a bit. You don't want to get too, I guess, involved, emotionally involved or emotionally attached to it because you don't know what's going to happen. Whereas, you know, with, for example, in my kind of experience with Marvel, I can get attached to the storylines and stuff, and because I feel like they're going to get finished, if that makes sense, or you know where they're going to go. Whereas with this, like I think it was, you know, the Force of Light Entertainment Girls, which is how you kind of came up. That's how we met, wasn't it? They did their Henry Cavill video, and it's just like they don't even know who's going to be Superman, so. How are they going? There's no real if they are going to recast it. I'm not sure. But there's no if they don't know who Superman is, how are they going to know where their story is going? You know, they need to know who these people are. They can have clear plot lines and stories, but you know, up until they've got these people in place to play the characters, nothing's going to happen. You know what I mean? It's not something that happens overnight either. So,
yeah, exactly. Well, and. The thing for me is I grew up. Okay, let me address what you were saying. I honestly think what they need to do going forward is they need to look at the metrics for once Zack Snyder's Justice League finishes, or you get that first week's numbers in and say, okay, there's obviously been a very positive response, and there's obviously been a very strong social media response, because we know that Warner Media, HBO Max, and Warner Brothers proper all have a social media presence on Twitter, on Facebook, and so on. I would imagine on Instagram as well.
Yeah.
if the response is unanimously or overwhelmingly positive, they're going to have their metrics to show, okay, people, this is what people want,
Yes.
and this is the direction that we need to go in now. And I think that's playing it very pragmatically. I mean, that's the position that I often like to take, is I like to take a pragmatic approach to things rather than being very using a lot of hyperbole and being very hyperbolic and so on. And I think the thing for me is, and Keely Chow brought it up in the chat, no recasting.
Yeah.
Now, I don't mind if they're going to do an Elseworld story with Superman and you're going to have Michael B. Jordan as Superman, a different Kryptonian, or have it be an Elseworld story. That's fine with me. But I will say, after watching Man of Steel and having now watched BVS, because I saw Man of Steel when it was out in theaters, and I walked out and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It had just been a long time since I'd seen it again.
Yeah.
But when I did my watch party for BVS, the Ultimate Edition, a few weeks ago, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Yeah. I had not seen it in theaters because the trailer just kind of turned me off.
Mm.
But hearing so much about it from others online saying this is a really good movie, particularly the Ultimate Edition, you need to give it a chance. So I was like, okay, I'm going to give it a chance. And I've done a few videos back on the stuff that they did in BVS. I talked about Lex Luthor a little bit. I talked about the whole dynamic of the exercise and the use of power between Batman, Superman, and Lex. And I think Zack Snyder for me at least, has a good track record with the movies he's done that I have seen of. There are only two of his movies I have never seen, and that is Sucker Punch and Legend of the Guardians, the Owls of Ga'Hoole. Those are the only two of his I've never seen. Everything else of his I've seen except for, well, and I'll be watching it here later this evening, is Justice League. If they're going to go forward with the Justice League, then they need to keep the people they have in place as these characters in place. Because if you don't, you're going to confuse the audience. You're going to turn off the audience because these are the characters, these are the actors that the people have built an emotional bond with. Yeah. And I think that's, and I will say this, and then if you want to respond to it, Luke, by all means. Something Marvel did, and did exceedingly effectively, is they gave the audience an opportunity to build an emotional attachment to these characters. Mm-hmm. Now, whether you grew up reading comics like someone like myself, even if the character is not 100% off of the page, if there's enough of a similarity there and there's an emotional tie there, then the audience is going to resonate and attach themselves to that character and their journey. Mm-hmm. What Snyder has done is he has done that in two movies. He did with Man of Steel and he did with BVS, particularly the Ultimate Edition rather than the regular theatrical cut. And that is something that he has done in all of his films that he has done throughout his career. He gives you the opportunity to build an emotional bond to the characters you see on screen. And that's something that Snyder and several other directors are very good at. But unfortunately, there are certain directors lack in. Yeah. So anyway, Luke, your thoughts on anything I just brought up?
Yeah, I think what you said in terms of we keep comparing it to Marvel, which is, I guess, it's DC and Marvel, isn't it? They're the two they've been head to head for ages, but that they've gave you the opportunity to grow. Like you mentioned, first Iron Man was 2008. Some people, like you've just said, probably disagreed with Robert Downey Jr. as an actor to play that role when he first came out because, well, that's not like the comic character or the comic book person, But as they continued watching the movies, they've grown with him. They become more accepting of that person because it's not chopping and changing. It's relative to the storyline. He's got his own storyline within the MCU and stuff like that. Whereas if, for example, the Justice League, they start chopping and changing all these characters and you have to start from scratch pretty much again. When they've already done it, they've already started, they have something to work with. And if they were to just kind of disregard that all, they've got to do it all over again. And I think that is kind of where Marvel kind of hit the jackpot, if you will, because they stuck with one idea. They had the characters, the main core of characters, and none of them were really recast. So everyone kind of grew with those characters. They had their own standalone films, and they brought them all together for the kind of big events movies as well. So, you know, everyone was invested into those characters. If you just start chopping and change, if Iron Man changed every movie and Captain America changed every movie, no one would really care as much. No, it doesn't. It's not relative to the storyline. No, it's a different Captain America. I don't care. You know, everyone sees Chris Evans as Captain America, and they care about Chris Evans as Captain America in terms of the movies that I'm talking about, of course. But
yes,
if they start chopping and changing Superman and Batman all the time for every single movie, no one cares, and everyone's like, well, this was the best Batman, and this is the best Batman, and it just causes more conflict within kind of the fandom because everyone's comparing. Whereas, for example, Iron Man and Captain America, the two kind of ones that aren't really involved in the MCU anymore, but their stories are there. They have that whole journey. There was no chopping and changing. Everyone was emotionally attached or invested into their kind of storyline. And if that character or that actor, was to change every movie, I don't think it would have had the same effect at all. Like, no one would have really been, not they wouldn't have cared, but it wouldn't have had the same effect. And that's kind of, I guess, the difficulty or something DC need to be wary of, because if they're going to start doing that, unless they start from scratch and then they have a clear vision, but the kind of track record doesn't show that's the case, because they have something right here they could build on. So it's a tough one. Like, are they going to recast everyone, or is it just going to be Superman? Because then that wouldn't make sense if they just recast one character. Because if they're going to recast one, you recast them all, because you've already had you've had that storyline with other people. If you know, it would be like, for example, to liken it to Marvel, halfway through, I don't know, say for example, the second Avengers movie, someone else is Iron Man, and then everyone's like, what? But it doesn't make sense to the storyline, you know what I mean? But everyone else is still the same. That's like, for example, they were saying they might be recasting Superman. If that was they would continue this story and the other characters are the same actors, then it'd just be, I don't know, I think it'd have a negative impact on moving forward, in terms of some people be highly turned off by it, and then others might like it. But if they're going to start from scratch with everyone, you can't kind of have the best of both worlds, is what I'm trying to say, I think.
No, yeah, I totally agree. And, you know, that is something that is very true, particularly nowadays with so many different fandoms out there. We get attached to these characters that we've seen on the printed page or we've seen in other media, and we grow an attachment to them. Yeah. And they become almost a part of our own identity in a lot of ways. And this is something I've brought up before, you know, particularly with one franchise I think we both appreciate, and that's Star Wars.
Yeah.
There are so many characters within that universe that everybody can have a personal favorite. And I did not too long ago, I talked about connection to Luke Skywalker and how his journey helped me to come to terms with the passing of my father. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that's something that's very integral about us as human beings, is we look at these characters that come into our lives, that we allow into our lives in a lot of ways. And we don't want to see them misrepresented. We don't want to necessarily see them cast in a poor light. We want to see them go on a journey. We want to see them grow and evolve and change, but we want that evolution and that change to have meaning and to make sense. And when you've got these studios who come in and monkey around with things like they did so badly, from what I hear. Now, I've never seen the theatrical version of Justice League, and at this point, I probably won't give it my time. I know some people have. I know there are some people that I associate with, that I talk to online and so on, who say you should watch Justice League at some point. But for me, honestly, if I'm going to invest 4 hours in a movie by a guy and it was his original vision, that's what I'm going to connect with. That's the version of the characters I'm going to resonate with. I'm not going to resonate with some counterfeit version of these characters that doesn't have a whole lot of connective tissue to what the artist's original vision was supposed to be.
Yeah.
I'm just that doesn't work with me. And the great thing about pop culture is, and this is something I very strongly believe in, it is in a lot of ways our modern myths. It is our modern mythology in a lot of ways. It is, this is something I've wanted to talk with several people about. Pop culture has been a constant throughout the history of humanity in one form or another, whether you go way back to the ancient civilizations of like Greece or Egypt or any of the others, when they built their pantheon of gods and what have you to explain their existence and how things came to be, the ordering of their world around them. A lot of that mythology has been kind of encapsulated down into what we see as modern pop culture now. I mean, we debate about who could win a battle against who between Marvel and DC or within the same universe. And I could imagine thousands of years ago, they were debating, well, my God can whip your God's butt. It's kind of like, question, did you ever see the original Conan the Barbarian with Arnold Schwarzenegger, the very first one?
Probably years ago, but I don't remember. Maybe I was like a teenager, so I don't recall. I remember seeing bits of it, but I can't make the connection.
Okay. That's okay. I'll give you the short version. There's a scene between him and the thief, and they're talking about their gods, and Conan makes this comment to Subutai, the thief, the other character. He's like, "Crom will knock the wind out of your, will stomp the ass of your puny god." Yeah. And that for me is like one of the very first great nerd debates. Well, my god can whip your god. Well, my superhero can whip your superhero.
Yeah.
And it's evolved and everything. It's been a constant thing throughout the evolution of humanity. We try to create these characters as a means to understand ourselves. And for characters like Superman or Batman or anyone in the Marvel universe, everybody connects and takes kind of ownership and kind of hoists the banner of that particular character and say, this is my hero. This is the person I identify with.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the great things about having the internet, where we can come together and we can express our love and our appreciation and have these debates about, well, my hero can whip your hero or my team can whip your team. And it's a great experience, honestly. I mean,
yeah,
I know it may seem like right now there may be a lot of division throughout the world, but honestly, I think there's a lot more that connects us than what divides us. And that's one of the reasons why I have a hashtag on my Twitter that says no more division. Because there is so much more about us when it comes to pop culture that unites us than divides us. The only reason we let things divide us is because we let a bunch of, negatives do so.
Yeah.
We let those negative voices cause division among us, and I say, no. There is more that divides us as geeks and as nerds and as fans than there is that divides us.
Yeah.
So, and that's why, when I created my channel, I decided first and foremost, I wanted it to be a place where people could come together and discuss these things in a intelligent and fun and positive way. So.
Yeah.
Luke, you still there?
Yeah, no, sorry. I thought you were still saying something.
No, go ahead. Please.
I completely agree with that. Like, for example, if you was to say, I know a lot, to use one example, there was a lot of division, for example, in the Star Wars universe with the sequels, the prequels, the originals and stuff, when the bigger picture is we all like Star Wars, so everything else is kind of, what's the point if you like Star Wars stuff? Like, I know even I, for example, have certain dislikes towards things that happened in the sequel trilogy, or certain things that might have happened in the prequel trilogy, but I grew up on them. So when I was growing up, I'd watched the original trilogy first, but I grew up with these characters from Anakin and his storyline. So then later on, when I come to watch the sequels, certain things I didn't agree with, but it was still Star Wars, and that was kind of what brought us all together in the first place. So in terms of the bigger picture, why are we all arguing? You know what I mean? So everyone has their own opinion. Everyone will always have their own opinion about certain things, and people are going to disagree on all these opinions. But the bigger picture, or the greater good, or whatever you want to call it, is we all love Star Wars. We all love Marvel. We all love DC. Whatever it might be, that should outweigh any disagreement or any negativity towards a certain point that we may have. So, for example, if I was to be, or anyone was to be arguing with anyone else on, say, Twitter or over YouTube, or even, I guess some people might do it in this kind of medium, where they might be arguing, well, this character should have done this, or this character should have done that. Well, I can't do that. I was just like, it's Star Wars. Enjoy it. You know what I mean? Yeah. You might not like it, but that other person might like it. You know, it's not wrong. It's not right. It's your personal experience of that moment. And for you to then say that someone else's experience of that moment is wrong is also wrong in itself. So if you like Star Wars, just like it. You know, some things you're not going to like, but for them to say everyone else is wrong because they like it and you don't is silly in itself.
Yeah.
That's my take on it all anyway. No, like you've just mentioned, it should bring everyone together. And it's great to sometimes have those discussions where you have, for example, I was doing some talks on my channel with some other people just before Christmas about the original trilogy and stuff like that. And certain moments where, because they'd explained it from their point of view, you see it in a different light. It's not because I didn't agree with it. I just hadn't seen it that way before. So when you have a discussion with someone, it doesn't have to be negative. If you just kind of put your point across, you may see that point you might see that moment in a different way. You've just not considered that opinion before. So, for example, a load of people might talk about the sequel trilogy and how they perceived it to be something amazing, and then you see it from their side, and you'd be like, you know what, they're not wrong, because once you've seen it from that side, you're like, that actually makes sense. You know, they're not wrong in what they're saying. It's just you've experienced it one way and they've experienced it another. There is no right or wrong. It's just how they've experienced it different to yourself. So that should be something that brings you together to have those discussions. It shouldn't be an argument of you're wrong and I'm right and I'm wrong and you're right or whatever. It's just appreciate everyone's opinions. That's what brings us all together in these fandoms anyway. You know, we all, the main, not objective, the main point is we all love that particular fandom. You can have the discussions, you can have the debates and all that sort of stuff, but it doesn't need to be negative. At no point does it need to be negative. It's just seeing it from a different light. I think that's how I like to see it anyway.
Yes. Well, and you know, growing up in the environment that I didn't really have, you know, as I mentioned, I am a geek born of geeks. Speaking. And the one thing that my parents and my grandmother, because my mother and my grandmother raised me primarily particularly after my father passed, and the one thing they always told me is, you're going to come across people in life where you're not going to be able to reach them.
Yeah.
But you can at least say, okay, I tried. We weren't able to come to a point of agreement. Move on.
Yeah.
There's no point in continuing to butt heads with someone that you know you're not going to be able to reach.
Yeah.
And, you know, and the other thing is, even if you disagree with that person, that doesn't mean that you just cut off ties to them. You don't just cast them aside, because first and foremost, they are a human being just like you. They may have a different perspective and a different frame of reference and come from a different background entirely, but that doesn't make their take they have a differing opinion. And I think part of the problem with the online space, and it's something that I'm happy to say seems to be changing, at least in some corners of the online sphere, the space where we are able to come together and say, okay, here's my perspective, here's your perspective. They may not necessarily mesh, but we can still respect one another. We can still talk to one another. We can still be civil, or if not civil, then we can be friendly to one another and have that be genuine. And that for me has been something that's been very much in the back of my mind ever since I've been doing this, ever since I started my channel, is I wanted to try and be as amiable and accepting and respectable to everyone that I can be. Now, there have been a few instances where I have had to cut ties with people. I didn't necessarily like to, but there was just too much of a difference there, and there was other circumstances involved that I said, I'm not going to be able to reach this person. I've tried to reason with them, but it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And does it bother me sometimes? Sure it does. But the thing for me is, do I want to keep bashing my head against a brick wall? Or do I just want to say, okay, there's a difference of opinion here. We're not going to be able to get past it, and it's going to just be a point of contention going forward. Then I say, I wish you the best. I wish you well, and I move on. Yeah. And I don't. The thing for me is, and this is something I've brought up, I don't generally like to get involved in a whole lot of drama online. My life has enough going on as it is. Then I need to be involved in someone else's drama or someone else's business. And that's why you don't see me do videos or streams like that.
Yeah.
And if I do, it's something I'm well informed on, and I have what I feel is a sound opinion. And I just move on because I'd rather talk about the stuff that I enjoy rather than getting embroiled in a bunch of drama. As the old saying goes, keep the drama for your mama.
Yeah.
I think if you're familiar with that phrase. But, it has been a great journey, and I look forward to the next phase of it, particularly now that we live in a world where the Snyder Cut exists. Because I hope that this is something that resonates not just with the Snyder Cut movement or the DC movement or the DC fan base or whatever the case may be, but I hope this is something that reaches out beyond that particular fan base and reaches into the general consciousness and people go from the from just the general public and go, holy crap, now we get it. Now we understand. And we get what Snyder was trying to do.
Yeah.
So, I know there's a lot of division in the world right now, and that's unfortunate. But I think in terms of us as geeks and as nerds of every stripe, it is truly a great time to be alive, because if you think about it, whether you're a DC or Marvel fan, there's a lot of good out there.
Yeah.
In those two particular franchises.
You just need to look back. There's, like you said, even both universes is vast. You can get lost in it for days, hours, months, years, whatever. If you want to go that far back, you can. And like you've just mentioned, the Snyder Cut coming out could determine the future of DC and the path it takes, which is only something good. Like, this is an amazing opportunity that they now have, depending on how they take, like you said, if they're going to look at all the critics and the analytics and all that sort of stuff of how it would perform, this might inform their decision in a positive way, and then DC may take off, which is what everyone wants. No one wants, I guess, the people that are criticizing, or not even criticizing is not the word, they may not be happy with the direction it's taken. It's because there's not been a direction yet, and that's the main gripe. But this could change everything, which is, I think, what's so many people are excited about.
Yeah. Well, and as I have said previously, competition amongst franchises is a good thing because your competition brings out the best in people.
Definitely.
And I think if DC finally gets its feet underneath it with whatever version or multiple lines that they decide to go with, that means Marvel's going to have to step up their game even more.
Yeah, because they're not going to want to fade.
No.
In the background.
And I think, honestly, I want to see these two franchises, these two universes that everybody loves various parts of or loves overall, go head to head.
Yeah.
It's going to be quite literally. Go ahead, Luke.
Everyone wants to see them at the peak of the power, like setting the bar. Like at the moment, the majority of fans, I guess, Marvel has set the bar, and they're the one who's raising it. That hasn't happened yet with DC. They need to be on a level plane. They need to be like this, not, that's the difference, in my opinion, anyway, at this point. And I think that's why this Snyder Cut it's been so heavily anticipated, because this could be the start of something brilliant for DC moving forward, because they've wanted this. I guess it's not this version. This is the true version of what Snyder wanted it to be, right? So,
yes, exactly.
That's the point. This could be the future direction, and this could be the bar moving for DC moving forward, which is what we want. We want them to be, like you just said, competition brings the best out in people. It works exactly the same with businesses. It works exactly the same with movie studios. If one's just moving up and one's stagnating or not really doing anything because they've got no clear direction, then Marvel's just going to keep going. You want them there like that. Each movie that comes out, each new series, each new thing is moving that bar, and then they're thinking, oh God, we've got to do something amazing to beat that, because then everything's amazing, everything, it will just be non-stop. It'd be incredible to have them both at the peak of the powers. And that's all everyone wants, and some people may prefer one universe to another and say, oh, well, I only want Marvel to do well, but then, they're kind of missing the point, because if their DC was also doing well, then Marvel has to get better, because they don't, like you've just said, they don't want to fade. They don't want to, not fade into the background, but they won't want them to do better. It's competitive anyway, isn't it? It's competitive nature. They'll want to outperform the other in terms of views and box office sales and all that sort of stuff. So for them to keep raising the bar and so on and so forth, that's healthy competition. That's what everyone wants. And so for one to say, I don't want them to do well, is only really hurting the universe you like, because there's no competition. They can just keep going the way they are without really changing much. They know there's no challenge. If there's a challenge, you have to up your game. It's the same with all sports. It's the same with everything. So.
Oh yeah. Well, it's one thing in particular. It's almost like Marvel and DC are like Godzilla versus King Kong.
Yeah.
They're both gonna come out and they're gonna give their best punches.
Yeah.
And eventually there's gonna be a victor.
Yeah.
But eventually the defeated is gonna come back and go, I'm back. And I'm ready for you this time. I am ready for you, and I'm going to knock you out.
Yeah.
And very well, that very well may be the case. I want to see Marvel and DC both thrive, because as a comic book geek, which I have been since I was 5 years old, since I ever bought my very first comic book, which is in fact, oddly enough, it wasn't even a superhero comic. It was a Transformers comic book.
Yeah.
Ever since I was a kid, I've been a comic book geek, and to see comic book movies really flourish, become this great art form, particularly with people like Zack Snyder and the Russos in charge of them, and doing these great films.
Yeah.
It is nothing but, for me, but a treat, an absolute treat to see these characters I've read on the printed page for years on end finally come to life.
Yeah. That's what everybody wants.
That for me has been a great experience, and to see adaptations that are faithful but have a different flavor to them, honestly, never bothers me. I mean, because if you think about it, regardless of the character, there's going to be numerous different iterations of that character. That's why you've got the Marvel multiverse. That's why you've got the DC multiverse.
Yeah.
Because there's different versions and different things have happened in these different versions of these characters' lives. And there is no one specific definitive version of this character. It is a collage or a kaleidoscope of different things that have impacted this particular character's journey.
It's ever changing. It will continuously grow. There hasn't been an end to the story yet. So,
there, even into 2021, going all the way back to the very first Superman comic, way back when, by Simon and the two gentlemen that created the very first Superman comic. Superman and all the other comic book characters, both Marvel and DC alike, have gone on various journeys, come from different backgrounds and everything else in between. And 2021, we just have a continuation of that dynamic.
Yeah.
I mean, as I mentioned a little bit ago, pop culture is just a modern adaptation of mythology and how we, through these characters, explore the human condition and understand the world around us. And Zack Snyder has created something truly dynamic with his version of Justice League and with the Snyderverse. And I truly hope the Snyderverse does continue, and I hope the MCU continues. And that we as the public and we as fans are given these great stories to come together and discuss and debate and analyze and break down, or just simply sit back and watch and enjoy. Exactly. So, well, Luke, I know you've got to get going here in a little bit. But I'm going to let you give any final thoughts. I'll let you do a plug for your channel. I have put, for everybody in the chat and everybody that catches on the replay, I have included the link to Luke's channel in the description. So go over and subscribe. Check out his content. It is worth your time. And Luke, I'm going to yield the floor and I'm going to let you have the closing word.
Perfect. It was just literally on what you were just saying then as well, in terms of there's so many iterations, and we were saying before about recasting the characters and stuff, and you don't want that to happen if it's in a certain storyline. If it's a completely new storyline, it's fine, or there's some, or it's the past version, or it's a future version, like for example, if we was to liken it to the Star Wars universe now, if there was some new content of Luke Skywalker coming out where after the original trilogy, but before the sequel trilogy, the reality is Mark Hamill won't be able to portray that character amazingly well because of his age and stuff. So at some point you have to kind of think the character, the Luke Skywalker is the character, Mark Hamill is the actor, they're two separate things, but it's a different story. You know what I mean? This would be a new story. Like you've just mentioned, it kind of ties in with the Snyderverse. If you was to continue with that story, you want the same actors. If it's a different story, it's a different narrative. You can kind of go down that path if you need to. And I just wanted to say thank you for inviting me on. And like you've just said, my channel is in the description below. It's AnyWorldButOurs. And thank you very much for inviting me on.
Yes, absolutely. And Luke, the door is always open. The invitation is always there. Anytime you want to join me, you are more than welcome to. And I look forward to what you've got coming up next for us. And again, it has been a pleasure. It has been a great time. And I very much respect you as a fellow geek. I respect you as a fellow creative. And as I like to say to any first-time guest, you come in a stranger, you leave an ambassador.
Thank you very much.
So you go out into the world and you represent yourself and you represent the things you love as best you can in the best possible way that you can. And you do so with integrity and you do so respectfully, and you have done that. So, Ambassador Luke,
Thank you very
Absolutely.
much.
So, anyways, folks, that is going to be the stream for now. I do want to thank everybody that tuned in today, and I appreciate all of you being here. And again, go support this guy. I hate when I do that. Go support this guy. Yeah, it's everything's reversed, everything's flip flopped, and I hate that. I do want to let you all know I will be back in a couple hours with the Council of Ones, and we'll be continuing our review of Babylon 5 Season 3 with the episode Messages from Earth. So I will see you all then. And then, of course, I have gone ahead and set it up for this Saturday evening at 5:30. I'll be going live with my first stream review of Zack Snyder's Justice League. So hope to see you all. And that all being said, you all have a great afternoon wherever you're at. And until next time, these are the Ambassadors, signing off.